Well, hi again, Beaver Nation, and welcome to the OSU Basketball Practice Center with Oregon State men's basketball coach Wayne Tinkle to talk about his second recruiting class, the class of 2016. And Coach, this is an exciting day and time and period for the program. I know that with all of the excitement about a consensus top 20 class last year, there were people perhaps on the outside saying, well, what kind of momentum can you generate when you don't have, quote unquote, sons of coaches that are part of the class? And it looks to me like you and your staff have answered that question in a big way, because this is an outstanding class, again, to follow up last year's.
No, we're very excited. We obviously knew as a staff, that we were going to be able to recruit and follow the momentum from the 15 class. And we couldn't be more thrilled than the three initial signees here, and looking forward to following them in their seasons this year, but then getting them here on campus next season.
We'll talk about each young man individually here in a moment, but just in general, these three in terms of how this class augments your first. What are some of the goals you had, and how these guys, in a sense, as a whole, meet some of those needs?
Well, we kind of look at what we're losing, right? And if you look at the 5 seniors that we have, it's pretty much somebody at each position. So we knew that we were going to need another point guard to kind of replace GP2, if you will, as hard as that's going to be. We lose some wings, so we knew we needed a wing with some size, and then we lose a couple post players. So we felt like those were our 3 top priorities, and we got the top kid at each position that we were recruiting. So obviously very excited about the group, and we have 2 scholarships left, and we're not sure whether we'll use them both this year, maybe use one and then pigeonhole one for the next class. But we're very excited with these 3 to get things started.
And Coach, in terms of the momentum and building on the outstanding class that we've alluded to from last year, and the vision that these young men that they're excited about and committed to, just tell us a little bit about how the momentum that you generated in your first year, the recruiting class, and how these guys fit, just sort of, I want to be part of that.
Yeah, that's been a big part of it, and a big part of our message is, everybody says they want to build a family type atmosphere, and that's kind of the buzzword these days. But when you bring them here, and now that we have 2 sons in the program, and haven't changed the way we do things, by the way, I think that message is validated when they get here and they see how we go about our business day in and day out. So there's some kids that maybe chase the glitz and the glamour. We go after the blue-collar kids that want to be a part of something special, something bigger than themselves, go to a place where they can get an incredible education and be taught by the nation's best, play in a class conference by being coached by great people that know how to coach the game, and really have that atmosphere of a family. And these kids we targeted knew were going to be attracted to those things. And so, it's nice that it's all culminated into a really great start to the 16 class.
Let's talk about each player now individually a little bit. Every recruiting story to me in all sports, they're interesting stories, how young student athletes make a decision. You've touched in general about a special place and fit. When we talk about the young man from Archbishop Mitty in San Jose, in Ben Kone, he is quoted as saying, "I love Oregon State. I love Corvallis." My sense I get from you is you reciprocate that feeling about Ben. But tell us, let's start with Ben and the recruitment of Ben Kone and that love that you obviously communicated about this place that he seemed to really feel.
Well, it was an interesting recruiting process. First of all, his mother really helped control things. She didn't want him to lose focus on his academics and his other responsibilities. So we had to sort of set up a time and day when she would allow us to call, and call through her phone was the only number she gave out. So it was very controlled, which was great. But the difference is most kids, for a while at least, they want to entertain as many calls as they can, right? And so it was really, I fell in love with that, the fact that she wasn't going to let it get out of control, and that she was going to go through the sifting out process and help boil it down for him before she handed out his phone number. And it was neat. And I think we made a pretty good splash as a staff with her and Ben early on. We got to see him play quite a bit. And what we saw was a kid that played with an incredible amount of intensity and focus on both ends. A lot of emotion, but harnessed, not wild. And obviously then we saw what we thought, were the things that could be strengths of his back to the basket play, the fact that he could step away. But he was a leader, he was very vocal and talented, and obviously we knew was a great kid by the way his mother raised him. So, as coaches, sometimes you look for certain things throughout the process, and you hope to, maybe brush shoulders as you pass by, in a summer evaluation when you can't talk to them. And it was kind of funny that he was trying to seek those moments out from our staff, and we joke about, certain times we'd go to get a Gatorade at a concession stand, and boom, next thing you know, he's standing there and you've got to turn and walk away because you obviously can't talk to him. But it was neat that he was recruiting us, and we felt like we were in pretty good position with him there for a while, or after a while. We think that he's going to come in and I think address some issues and some needs in the post and even on the perimeter a little bit, and bring a different dynamic. We're very vocal. He's very secure in who he is. A lot of freshmen come in and they really kind of tamper, and dampen who they are because they feel like they're freshmen. Well, he's going to come in right away and give us everything we're asking and not try to, hide himself until he feels like he's earned it.
We start with Ben just because he was the first commit of the class of 2016, and a young man that was named the San Jose Mercury News Player of the Year in a talent-rich area that had a lot of interest from a lot of very quality programs too.
No, certainly, yeah. He was a guy that was getting looked at by a lot of programs, and I just think, here's another interesting story. Our deal is we don't offer scholarships over the phone, and we don't just throw them out there to the wind like you see a lot of places do, and nothing against those because they might stick, at some places. But we like to build the relationship first, and we get criticized by a lot of the AAU programs that we're missing out on kids. Well, we don't maybe want the kind of kid that's just collecting a box full of offers. So we treat it like courtship in a marriage. We try to build the relationship, work through differences. Then when we feel secure and good about it, we like to get face-to-face and offer that scholarship in that scenario. We feel it adds a lot more value because we feel like we've really got a special thing here. He came up on an unofficial visit with his mother in the June after his junior year, and so we offered face-to-face. And when they decided that they wanted to come to Oregon State, they scheduled an impromptu visit back in August. And we're like, well, we're going to bring you on an official now. Yeah, we just want to come up one more time. Well, they did that so they could commit to us face-to-face. So they really appreciated the process. So it was neat how we were able to build the relationship, and I think obviously win out in the end because of the way we went about it.
Coach, before we get to the next player specifically, when you talk about building the relationship first, and then it clearly was reciprocated by the way that Ben had the same type of relationship with you to want to be face-to-face when he made his commitment. As you've recruited and recruited well through the years, has that been something that, early on that maybe you just discovered this was the right methodology for you and a staff to build it this way?
I think so. At the University of Montana, we had assistant coaches that came from other places that wanted the kind of throw a bunch of offers out to these kids when they were sophomores and juniors because you never know when you might get one to commit. Well, my thought was twofold. A, if they really blew up to become good players, they weren't going to stay loyal to you and they were going to go somewhere else by the time they were seniors. But B, and most importantly, was I think we were selling our program short. My thought process was this is a special place. These kids will learn and understand and won't turn their back on us versus anybody. So why should we try to sneak some of them, at that younger age? Plus, an additional point is if I tell you that you're my number one prospect at the point guard position, but then you go online, which kids do these days, and he sees that I've offered 6 other players at that position, how much faith is he going to have in me, right? And so I kind of laugh when I hear recruiting stories that kids are being told they're their #1 prospect, and then you look at the websites and they've recruited a bunch of other players and offered the same guy. So when we moved here to Oregon State, it was the same thing. I mean, we love the pride and the tradition of our program and our university. So we weren't just going to try to sell our souls to try to get all these kids. We were going to send the same consistent message, knowing that it would lead us to the right kind of kids that we feel will succeed here in Corvallis.
Let's talk about a consensus 4-star point guard, dynamic player out of a small town, Gig Harbor, and he's already said that the Gig Harbor small town feel, this resonates with him to be in Corvallis, in a true campus and college town. But Jakori McLaughlin is a big time prospect in all sites that you read about, and his recruiting story is very interesting. So how did Jakori end up in Oregon State Beaver? It's a pretty long story, isn't it?
It is. I'll try to be brief. I know we're thrilled that we have him, but when we got the job in May, he had already committed to Coach Robinson and his staff as a sophomore. And so we obviously picked up the phone and tried to reach out. I'll back up. He decommitted once there was a coaching change. Before I was hired, he decommitted from Oregon State. So when we got in place, we reached out, said that we wanted to have an opportunity to re-recruit him and let him get to know this staff. And so right away they drove down, and they had joked that it was probably their 5th or 6th visit to Corvallis, and how they loved this town because of the college feel and its proximity to Tacoma and Gig Harbor, where he was from. And so we continued that process and recruited our tails off, and it just ended up that the following fall he committed to the University of Washington. His parents grew up in Seattle, Tacoma. They grew up, loved watching UW. So to us, it was, it wasn't a huge surprise. And then when you add to the fact, that Coach Romar's a great guy and done some great things. So after that, we were like, okay, well, we need to change gears. And without a doubt, he had quickly become our #1 point guard for the 2016 class. And so then we had to change direction when he committed to Washington. And we had gone to a couple of events where we bumped into him and his family, and it was neat. One time he walked by and just kind of patted me on the shoulder, "Hey, Coach." So it was neat that there was a little bit of mutual respect there. Well, then, as that season concluded, the spring of last year, we had heard that he may be looking to change his mind. And so we got word to his high school coach, if it indeed happens, let us know, we'd like to get involved. And we weren't going to call he or his family directly until we had heard that. And so sure enough, he decommitted, made it public in May of last spring. And so we tried to jump back in. And at some point, it was released, I believe, by the high school coach that this was his new top list of 4 or 5 teams, and Oregon State wasn't in it. And we didn't panic, and I just think it was, out of 6, 7, 8 schools, those were the 4 that came out in the story. We didn't call and cuss out the family at all. We just said, hey, we want to stay involved, and we know it's still early. And the father said, no, we're certainly still interested in Oregon State. So, proceed with the recruiting process. And I just had a feeling that, this kid was meant for our program. And so we made him a priority. And I went to every one of his games throughout the month of July, and that made an impression. And a family had come down another time for an unofficial, and we really just sort of clicked. And then he quickly boiled that list down to 3 schools, ourselves, Utah, and Wisconsin. Told us very early on that he was going to visit all 3. And we knew we were going to be the first weekend. We wanted to bring him here the first opportunity. And we put a lot of faith that, he was going to visit those other 2 schools and still remember, the visit that he had here in Corvallis with us. And as it turned out, they stayed true to that. They said, Coach, we're not going to commit to any of these schools until we've taken all 3. And then the dad kind of let us in as it went on that we were in really good shape to hang in there. And we promised In fact, we encouraged him to take those visits, knowing that he had committed and decommitted a couple of times. Be sure with yourself this time. We didn't put pressure on him to commit to us on his trip here. We said, you go to those other schools, and if they do a better job than us and you feel like that's a better place for you, I'll still be your biggest fan. And after those 3 trips, he still felt the same amount of love for us that he had kind of throughout the process.
I want to talk about his skills as a player in a moment, but a follow-up to that in terms of encouraging him to take the visits. I've heard what I would almost consider scary stories about don't visit there, or we need you to commit now, or whatever you do, don't go up there and visit, or whatever. All kinds of things go on in this competitive, crazy world of recruiting. But have you generally, Coach, just taken, you need to feel comfortable about this, so go? And
Well, you know, I'm a parent as well, and I went through this process with my daughters and then my son now, but we wanted them to have options if that's what they were looking for. And you know, my daughter Jocelyn wanted to visit 5 because she wasn't sure. Ellie, much like Jakori, knew that it was only down to 2 schools in August before her senior year, so it's different for everybody. But I don't want to try to put the pressure on a young man and his family when they're here. They should love you while they're on their visit. Well, we send them home and we want them to love us as much 2 days later. Then, if it makes sense and feels right, then you know it's sincere. So, you know, that's kind of our thought process, whether it be right or wrong. And if we're doing our jobs correctly, then it doesn't matter. We should only look that much better if they go to another place and visit if we did our job right. So it's good to know that that's kind of been our formula. And, you know, it doesn't always work, but for the kids that we really hope to get, we've got a pretty good rate of closing the deal.
how much of your current players and so on helped in this process? For example, someone such as Jakori, just to feel, hey, this is home for me, I want to be part of this.
No, certainly. They're a big part of the recruiting process, especially when we get them here to campus. And there's really 2 sides to that. The recruit gets a chance to see and know the players a little bit, to see if that's, you know, who they want to be around for the next 4 to 5 years. But then also your players can give you feedback. I had recruits in the past at Montana where the players will come back in on a Monday and say, Coach, he's not our kind of guy. Right. He doesn't have his priorities right. And so that helps. The fact that we had this good freshman class, you know, again, twofold. It was really exciting to a lot of people that they could jump in next year and be a part of this young group. But a lot of other schools were using it against us, saying, why do you want to go there? You know, Stevie Thompson can play each guard spot. Why would you want to go there and play behind him? Or, you know, he's going to run everything for his, you know, son and coach's son. Well, the kids that were worried and bothered by that aren't our kind of guys. Right. And Jakori and Ben and Keandre looked at the other way. We'll be joining a team that could have great potential if we can build and come together. So we knew they were the right ones.
Before we get to Keandre, let's talk about Jakori McLaughlin's skills and what you've seen. You said you saw every one of his games as much as you could, so you've seen a lot of them. What does he bring to the program?
Well, probably the most important thing is he comes from an incredible family. I mean, mom and dad have just done a great job. They started having kids early on and have really sacrificed any of their own goals and ambitions for their careers and that sort of thing to give a better life to their kids. I mean, the cohesion in this family is unbelievable. So welcoming them to Beaver Nation is probably what we're most excited about. Now, in specific as a player, he's a guy that can really handle the ball. He's got great length at 6'3", 6'4", athletic. I mean, he was measured with a 40-inch vertical at the Under Armour deal, can shoot it, but he's a pass-first point guard. In the last couple of summers and springs being out there on the road, he was the one guy that we identified as our kind of point guard, looking to distribute, set up his teammates, and then it's really neat that he can make plays for himself and shots when the time calls for it. And he's a willing passer. You know, a lot of point guards you see these days, they're just trying to get theirs, you know, and he's a guy that we feel like brings the total package. And then defensively, his length, anticipation skills is really going to bode well for our kind of system and what we think we're going to be able to do with the length and athleticism that we're bringing in.
Well, Coach, let's talk about Keandre Dew, a junior college player. I'm curious about the place through the years, bolstering a roster in a class with junior college people. Certainly GP2 has worked out extremely well, but tell us about Keandre Dew and his journey to become a Beaver.
Sure. Well, first off, as part of building your recruiting base and class, you can't just go get players. You've got to look to balance the classes. When we got here, we had no seniors, which meant we had no scholarships for 2015. That's why we kept those in our hip pocket. Well, now if you look, we've got this senior class of 5, a junior class of 2 in Shea and Malcolm, no sophomores, and then the freshmen. So we're trying to juggle and balance these classes so year after year we know that we have scholarships available. So looking at the 5 we have to use for 2016 and no juniors to be, we said, hey, if we can find the right junior college players that fit, it would be great to add some to that class so then in 2018 we have at least 1 or 2 scholarships. Does that make sense? So knowing that, we were looking for maturity and thought at the wing position, and so we started to cast our net in that sort of a pool. And Keandre quickly, his name came to us. We'd seen him play, we knew his history, and then each coach, we kind of try to get all eyes on our recruits so that, we can't ever say that's my guy, or if he comes and it doesn't work out, oh, that was my guy. But more importantly, so that we can all evaluate, because I trust everybody's opinion. The assistants saw him play other than Coach Rupp and I, and liked him. We were looking for an athletic wing with length and size, and obviously weren't going to compromise character. He's a little bit of a different junior college player in that he was a high school qualifier, went to a Division I program. You saw in some of his quotes, he said, that I made some mistakes, and he didn't mean like run-ins with the law. It was his attitude, and I really, really commend him for saying this publicly. And he told us through the recruiting process that he approached going to Tulsa, being a top 100 player. He strolled in there, thinking that he was a little better than he was, that maybe he didn't need to work as hard, that it was going to be handed to him. So he learned some valuable lessons. So it didn't work out. He felt like he was playing out of position and it wasn't a good fit. So he chose, instead of transferring to another 4-year school, going to a junior college and reinventing himself. That's his line. And we fell in love with his personality, with his work ethic. And when we brought him on a visit, Coach Rupp and I went down and saw a practice, so we got our eyes on him as well. And then we just, we fell in love with the young man, with his approach, the fact that he had learned his lesson and taken his lumps. And we could see, and the one thing I had to keep asking myself, is it too good to be true? Before our first breakfast on his visit, he had already been into the practice facility. I don't know how he got in there, and he's got up, several hundred shots. And it wasn't to try to, I think, an act to make us, fall in love with him. It's just his coach says he does that every day. Right. So adding a player like that and with that sort of personality and character, I think is really going to bode well. And it fits well into the recruiting puzzle we were looking to put together.
It is an interesting journey. Delray Beach, Florida, to Tulsa, City College of San Francisco, and now to Oregon State. But in terms of reinventing himself, as you say, so what does he do as a player in that process? If he's in here shooting in this facility 300 shots in before breakfast, that's pretty cool. Does he shoot it well? What are his skills? What does he bring?
Well, he's a legit 6'8", and the neat thing is I think he can play multiple positions offensively, but he can guard multiple positions defensively. Very long, good athlete, above average athlete, really handles the ball well for his size. I mean, he gets down lower than most point guards. Is a good shot maker from 15 and in. He can shoot it. He's got to work on, moving beyond the arc. He can pass. He's a willing passer again. Great teammate. We went to practice and he's patting guys on the butt if they miss a pass, encouraging guys, winning every sprint, going hard in the drills. And he does that daily, not just because we were there. We feel like he's a guy that we can let push the ball on a defensive rebound, knowing that he'll handle it just fine and make the right decision. I think with his size, we can post him up, whether he's a wing or a post. You know, he can be a guy that can get involved in pick and roll with the ball in his hands because he's a great decision maker. And I think his versatility is going to be a real strength of ours. And we bring in, you know, after losing the kids we lose this year, an experienced veteran college player with great maturity that we know is a good teammate and will help lead these guys.
Well, Coach, it's clearly an exciting and compelling class. It adds wonderfully to what you did with last year's class, but this one may not be fully complete. You touched on that earlier, but again, maybe help us understand what some of your thinking might be in kind of rounding this one out.
Sure. Well, if you add the 6 freshmen from a year ago and then our first 2 commitments this year, our first 8 commits were high school players. And then with Keandre being our first junior college player. You look ahead to 2017, we've just got Shea and Malcolm that will be graduating. Those scholarships would be available. 2017's looking to be a very good year for us with the recruits that we're involved with. So it would be nice to have one more scholarship in that group, to have 3. So with the 2 remaining scholarships, we may put one in the bank for the 2017 class. And the one that we have available is going to go to the best player that we feel fits our need. I think losing Jamal, Langston, and Gary, we may look to get another wing type player, and we may look to get another junior college player just to fit into that class, so that in 2018 we have 2 more to give. Right now we don't have anybody in that class. So Keandre and the next recruit that we hope to get would give us those 2 scholarships for 2018. Now, it could very well be a high school player. You know, if we don't feel like we've got the right fit out of a junior college player, then, you know, we'll take the next best player. That may be this fall, but we may take our time and make that 4th sign in the spring of this year.
And finally, just in terms of the excitement for this second year now, with the class from last year, the returning players, just working hard, and a lot of anticipation for the season. As the head coach of this group, delighted to coach them day in and day out. What are some of your thoughts about your second season about to unfold?
Well, we're very excited. This really feels like year 1. You know, last year was kind of a throw together. Let's lay the foundation, which is very important. But now we've got our 16 guys. We've got a recruiting class, you know, under our belt in here. And so this feels like kind of we're going to set the tone for how we're going to move forward. A little apprehensive right now with the injuries that we've gone through. You know, we're not going to have probably 3 or maybe 4 of our returning 7 guys out tomorrow night, but it gives opportunity to the young guys. So we've got to remain patient. We say it in every staff meeting. We're playing a lot of young guys. Our vets, a lot of them are banged up right now. Let's be patient with these young guys all the while not being easy on them. You know, we'd like to throw a little adversity at them early to see if they can handle it and help, I think, develop a little bit of toughness. But it's going to be fun. And if we can bring these guys through on the other end, the young guys I'm talking about, improve our leadership from our older group and get healthy, then I think it will only help us that much more come conference play.
And Coach, thanks for the time and congratulations
Always a pleasure.
on the class of 2016. Very
Thank you.
exciting stuff.
Thank you. We're
Thanks,
thrilled.
Beaver Nation, for joining us.